Hey everyone, Matt Thomas here. Thank you for watching this video. I'll be honest with you, this is my second time recording it. I recorded originally yesterday. It ended up being an hour and 15 minutes, and I went, there's no way I want you guys to sit through that. So what I did, this workshop can be divided into two parts. The first part is me explaining, the number one determining factor of success, and then the science behind it. The second part is how I implement it in my classroom. And so before you go, well, I'll just watch the first part because part two is just him doing his thing. There's a lot of valuable information in watching part two. I'm very meticulous when I create my lesson plans, and I create them based on science. I create them using this factor of success quite a bit. But everything I do in class is purposeful, and it has it's supported by science. And so there's a lot of value in watching kind of how I plan that. But anyway, so let me go through this quickly. And just a real quick about me, I'm not a neuroscientist. I want to get that right out of the way. I have a passion for behavioral psychology. I kind of always have. It started when I was in high school. I was a very young business owner. So I owned a business while I was in high school. And then when I got out of high school, I continued the business, did very well for 10 years. I sold it at its peak. And became a high school teacher. And some of you know the reason behind that. I've told you that before. But like many business owners, I read a lot of business books and how to be more successful in business. And business books, it's really a lot of behavioral psychology. How to make your clients happy, how to treat them well, how to show value in what you offer. A lot of behavioral psychology. So a lot of that transferred into the classroom when I started to become a high school teacher. I'll give you a little viewpoint on how I view educational studies. The reason I'm telling you this is because later on I'm going to show some studies, and I want to make sure that my perspective on these studies are that you understand that. I feel that educational studies, or oftentimes studies that are kind of done within its own career genre, I don't know if I'm saying that right, but educational studies they're not necessarily wrong, but sometimes they're incomplete. It's like, hey, this strategy is the best, it works. Really, when you take into all these different factors into account, it isn't necessarily the case, or it might be based on one teacher, one class, one district, one school. So oftentimes they're not necessarily complete. I feel that way. And I feel that many educational studies are inconclusive because it can be too difficult to determine a single factor as a measure of success. Like, this one strategy worked because it worked in my class. Yeah, but your class is different than other classes. The only thing I will say, though, except for the number one determining factor of success, what I'm about to show you, can be measured in real time, can be measured in I want to say most scenarios. I don't want to say all scenarios, right? I hate using absolutes, but most scenarios. So I think many studies are inconclusive because it can be too difficult, like I said, to determine a single factor as a measure of success, except for what I'm about to show you. The brain, because what I'm going to show you is based on science, the brain is very measurable. And sometimes in education, what we want from our students doesn't always align with the neuroscience or the psychology. We've talked about that in my other seminars. But anyway, let's get right into it. Here we go. Number one determining factor of success, and not just in education. This is kind of, I got this from, across a broad range of careers and disciplines, etc. And so the number one determining factor of success, if you want to be successful at something, the number one determining factor is whether a person enjoys it with accomplishment. So enjoyment with accomplishment. That with accomplishment is so important. The person has to feel like he or she's accomplishing something, because that will allow that person to continue on. But enjoyment is the number one determining factor of success. If a person enjoys something, they're more apt to continue it, especially if they feel like they're accomplishing something, they're getting better at it. So I joke around, for those of you who've heard me say this before, I joke around because I called it the Lundy effect for a little while, because and sorry, Lundstrom, I'm going to talk about you in a positive way right now, don't worry. But I want to give an example. So I'll just say this. Most students know, people know, like when you think of like great teachers, there's always like some that just jump right out. Raymond, West, Pueblo, Lundstrom, Campbell, Schmidt, Bartholomew, Ellett. I'll even add Conway in there right now. Like, Noah's great, right? I've never seen Noah teach, but I'm sure I can imagine him being a great teacher because his students love him, and he's got this great, club and so on. So it's there's this perception of this great teaching, and the one thing I would imagine that all of them have is that their students enjoy their class and that the teachers enjoy what they're doing. And the students are feeling like they're accomplishing something. I'll talk about that later. You can't just have fun and not accomplish anything. It's got to be enjoyment with accomplishment. So the reason I mentioned Lundstrom was I observed his class. It's got to be 6 or 7 years ago when there was a big push for teachers on campus to visit other teachers, and so I went into his class, and he and I had shared the same students, like my students, and they weren't maybe the same year. I think he was teaching AP Calculus, but I had my ninth grade advanced students. Like they ended up being in his class later on. So I'm walking to his class, and there's this like buzz. There's this like laughter going on in his classroom. And I walk in, and there's this positive buzz going on. Like people are so happy and cheerful and laughing. And he's up there doing math. I mean, they're laughing in a math class. He's up there doing math. And he's like, okay, what's this? And you've got students who are like yelling out the answers, and it wasn't chaos. No, not at all. It was completely controlled. Everybody was just having fun. And he was like joking and putting math up and saying, he's like, hey, who wants to come up here and solve it? And no joke, many students volunteered. Someone ran up and did it. And I'm like, wow, this is amazing. And I'm sitting there watching, and just everyone's having so much fun, and they're learning math. And it was complete control. I mean, he had total control over his classroom, and they were so engaged. And it's because the students enjoyed what they were doing, enjoyed the way he taught it, most importantly, and they were feeling like they were accomplishing something. So I have a bunch of quotes on here. You can pause them and read them if you want to. I won't read all of them, but I kind of bolded the ones that I wanted to read. We know that if a kid connects with his teacher and relates to him or her, he'll try harder and do better. Having fun and being excited about learning increases brain activity of neurons, which improve learning and memory. I'm going to bring that up later, and I'm going to show you in part 2 how I use that to help my students prepare for tests. If you can create a neurological link between what the student is doing, I should say you can create a neurological link between what the student is doing and their memory. They'll be able to remember it so much better. I'll show you that in part 2. And this quote, the higher of the enjoyment experience, the more athletes elect to participate and persist in their sport, the more they feel the desire to exert greater effort. And I bring in a lot of quotes from different genres and different disciplines, because I don't want you to think that I'm focusing just, like this is just an education thing, or this is just a sports thing, or whatever. It's through a multitude of genres. If you enjoy what you're doing and you're feeling like you're accomplishing something, it's the most determining factor of success. So if we continue, and I'm going to bring a few more quotes up before I get into the science a little more. So enjoyment, this can be measured in real time and long term. So administration, you can walk into a class and be like, hey, you enjoying what you're doing? Yeah, the student's paying attention there. And I'm gonna say this, Hattie, I think it's Hattie instead of Haiti. I'm sorry, I think it's Hattie. Hattie doesn't measure it. So if you remember a couple years ago, there was the Hattie effect size that was being brought up in education a lot. And I love, first of all, I love meta-analysis. I'm not trying to say anything bad about Hattie and what he's accomplished. Not at all. I love meta-analysis studies. I do know there's flaws. I completely understand that in all studies and statistics. I get that. But I do love looking at meta-analysis. But what I'm saying is his like, this is the biggest effect size for teaching, doesn't include enjoyment, which it should, because it is the most, the number one determining factor of success. And so, but that can be measured in real time. That can be measured long term when someone comes back and goes, oh yeah, that teacher's class, I love that class. In education, we talk about engagement sometimes, but it's too generic of a term. Like in teacher school, right? It was like, oh, have good student engagement. Engage your students in what they're doing. Okay, how? Just do some engaging activities. Okay, but how? What does that mean? Give me something. And I going back to the fact that students have to accomplish something when they enjoy it, or it's not something that they'll continue doing. It's not necessarily a determining factor of success. If they love it, but they don't accomplish anything, they're probably more apt to just give it up. I hear this sometimes. Oh yeah, the teacher is really cool, but we don't learn anything in class. That's not a good thing, because it's not like just having fun without accomplishment. You have to accomplish something for you to continue being successful at it. So a couple more quotes, then I'll get into the science. Students will learn only if they're motivated. The higher the enjoyment experience, the more athletes elect to participate and persist in their goals. Again, these are from different genres, different quotes here. I put in a TED Talk. So Sean Aker, he built his entire career about happiness in what you're doing and it leading to more success, a more successful career, whatever it is. And I linked this just the other day, actually, I put that in there because I thought, back in like TED Talk is the new NPR, right? Like if you wanted to sound smart, it's like, or lend credibility, on NPR, I heard about this. Woo, it must be true. So I'm like, let me shove a TED Talk in this presentation. So people are like, ooh, it's on TED Talk. It must be true. So there's the link if you want to watch the video. It's like 12 minutes or so. But essentially having fun and accomplishing something leads to a greater chance to learn. Having fun and experiencing enjoyment were identified as a proven way to build a socially connected learning environment. I'm going to talk quickly about the term having fun. I'm going to interchange it a lot. So I think I may even have a slide for this. I'm going to probably say having fun when I mean to say enjoyment. But I want to make sure it's clear. Enjoyment can mean a lot of different things. Actually, I think I have a slide in here somewhere. Oh, here it is. Okay, good. So enjoyment can mean many different things. When I say fun, I'm not just saying like, hey, tell jokes all day. That's not what I mean at all. You want to create lesson plans that you enjoy teaching and that the students enjoy learning. And honestly, it kind of starts with you enjoy teaching. And again, I'm getting to the science behind this. But I am going to probably say fun, but I don't mean, like I said, tell jokes all day. Fun could be like something that's engaging, intriguing, enjoyable, gratifying, amusing. And yeah, I did Google synonyms for enjoyment before I started presenting this. So again, when I say fun, I mean enjoyment. And enjoyment could be many different things, right? That can mean a lot of things. But let's talk about the science behind this. So essentially, it's dopamine. So I did talk about this in one of my previous workshops, and I think I mentioned to you, if this were a week ago, I would have called dopamine the feel-good hormone. But new studies have come out to show that it's not necessarily the case. Dopamine is released even when bad things happen. So, and I probably won't talk about that too much, but I'll differentiate it a little bit. So dopamine, you could say it's the feel-good hormone. It kind of is. It's the brain's reward system. Kinda, but dopamine is there's so many things that dopamine is responsible for, but I'm gonna kind of leave that out to another video, But essentially, when dopamine, I'll get into the next slide, is the anticipation hormone. So like it's like when a cell phone pings, ping, ooh, I got a text, right? Dopamine, and if students are, I'll talk about this a little bit later, but if students are if students are doing something that they enjoy and find challenging, they enter this state called flow, and they're completely engaged and not stressed at all. And that's so important for success. I'll talk about that a little bit later on, but let's talk about why dopamine is so important. So dopamine is the anticipation hormone. It's not the hormone. You don't get dopamine when you get something. You get dopamine when you anticipate something. So this is why it's so important that your students enjoy your class and that you enjoy teaching, or you make it fun or make it enjoyable for you. When students think like, oh, this period is so bad. Oh, next period I get to be in Lundstrom's class. Dopamine right there. Oh, I can't wait till fourth period I get to be with Miss Schmidt's class. Dopamine. So anticipation, when your students anticipate something good, now they're like, oh, dopamine. And they like that. Your body likes dopamine. So it's more apt to pay attention. It's more apt to repeat the process that gives them more dopamine. But when your students also anticipate things that are not fun, they also get a shot of dopamine. So that's kind of the new science coming out. And that in the case is not a good thing, because it's the different, the different type of factors, right? It's not good. It doesn't make you feel good. So when students are like, oh, I get to go to that class, cool. And it's not like, yay, that class. It's more like, oh, okay, cool. That class is cool. Like I don't have to stress. Dopamine. But if your students also anticipate something negative, that also it's not good, because now they're like not looking forward to the class and they're not going to put their best effort in. When a teacher anticipates something fun, like if it's Sunday night and you're starting your new lessons for Monday, or it's Wednesday night, you're starting a new lesson on Thursday or whatever, and that night you're like, yes, I can't wait to teach that lesson. Dopamine. That's good. That means that you're like, we're excited to go to work. If it's like, oh, I have to teach that lesson, they're not going to enjoy it and I'm not going to enjoy it, that's not a good thing, right? There's a quote about if students work hard at something that they enjoy and they find challenging, they're accomplishing something. They enter a state called the flow, where they're completely engaged and not stressed. I'm going to give you an example of that a little bit later on. So, when students anticipate something, and in part two, I'm going to show you how I create student anticipation. I purposely do something in class to make them go, "Ooh, pay attention. This is about to be good." And so that you can use that to your advantage, knowing that use dopamine to your advantage, I guess I should say. So this means a little red flag to your brain saying, pay attention to the students. This is about to be good. Pay attention to what's going on. And I use that too sometimes. I like to give a lot of sincere, positive reinforcement to the students. I think it's a missed opportunity when teachers don't do that. So some teachers will be like, "Oh, who's got the answer to question one?" And someone gives the answer, and they're like, "Good." Or they don't even acknowledge the answer, they just move on. That to me is a missed opportunity. So if someone answers something in class, I'm really big on like, thank you so much. Like you did, that was great. And keeping in mind that as teachers, we hear things over and over again, the answers, and we've heard over the years of doing this, we've all heard every answer, right? But the student has only said it once for the first time. And so I love to acknowledge that, like, oh my gosh, that was so good. Thank you so much. Dopamine. So now the students know that if they say something in class, they know they're going to get positive reinforcement, and they know it's going to be sincere. I'm not like, "Ooh, that was so good." No, it's sincere. Like, "Oh, thank you so much." So now their brain subconsciously is kind of like looking for that opportunity to get that. So if I'm like, "Hey, does anyone mind sharing what they have for a number?" And all of a sudden students are like, "Ooh, dopamine," right? And so they're more apt to respond. So if you as a teacher give positive reinforcement to your students, you will get a lot of people who want to respond. Like Lundstrom's class, going back to that example, when he said, who wants to solve this problem, he had no shortage of volunteers because they knew it was going to be a safe environment, everyone's going to have fun, and they're going to get positive reinforcement for doing it. Going back to long term. So if someone enjoys something, you can measure that right then. Are you having fun? Yes. This also applies long term. So I'm going to go to this last quote here. Even when students are remembering or thinking about something fun, it makes us more motivated to want to do it. The memory of your class. This is why it's very important to create a safe, positive classroom. And I put in this in parentheses. I think this is why educational strategies need to coexist with neuroscience and psychology, using this to your advantage. If you make class enjoyable and the students are having fun, when they think about your assignment, they'll remember that it was fun to do, and they're more apt to want to do it again and be more motivated. Video game designers know this stuff. This is nothing new to them, right? This is how they design these programs. And to be fair, I'm not like endorsing these. My wife, who's like a high level intellect kind of, she kind of gets all this stuff from my daughter, and I trust what my wife does. So I asked her like, "Hey, what apps does our daughter use?" And she's like, "Oh, Khan Academy and Generation Genius and Adaptimind." I think I wrote these down right. And so I just put these in because that's what my daughter had used at some point. So video game designers know this stuff, and it's like, wow, we can learn from them as educators, right? So let's get into the teacher. Enjoyment is not just about the student. I would argue it's not about. Okay, let me say this right. It should mostly be about the teacher. If the teachers are having fun and enjoying lesson plans that they enjoy, then the students are most likely going to enjoy it, or at least not hate it. Let's put it that way, right? So why it's important to have fun as teachers. So you need to have more fun, enjoy what you're doing, because you're going to enjoy your career. You're going to look forward to it. You're going to like wake up going, all right, I get to go to work today. Cool. Students will pay attention. And if your students enjoy your classroom management is going to be so much easier, so much easier. Seriously well. You'll have so much better classroom management if your students enjoy what you're doing or what they're doing. Your students will learn more efficiently because you're creating these neural pathways between their the knowledge and their memory, which I'll talk a little bit later on. Time goes faster. So when you're having fun, the brain cells are more active and they release a lot of dopamine, and your brain judges that less time has passed than actually has. When you're not having fun, these cells don't release as much dopamine and time seems to slow down. So time does go faster when you're having fun, which is, a good thing when you're teaching 7 classes. And I'm gonna tell you this quick story of a middle school teacher. So I remember I was at a conference or workshop, I forgot when, honestly, and the teacher was like, "Oh, we have all this curriculum that's scripted, and I can't teach what I want. But the last 3 weeks of school, I'm allowed to teach whatever I want. I get to have so much fun." And I thought, dude, first of all, here's the downside. Like she said, my curriculum is scripted, and I thought, okay, just try to find ways to make the curriculum fun. Like that, whether it's scripted or not. Like I get it, but how are you going to make that curriculum fun? And then, but at the end of 3 weeks, I can teach whatever I want. She was talking about mythology, and she's like, "I love mythology." I'm like, wow, it takes the entire year before you get to something that you enjoy. And no matter the curriculum, right? Try to find a way to make it enjoyable. And I'll talk about, like, not everything has to be enjoyable. I'll talk about that a little bit later on. But I just felt bad for her. I'm like, oh my gosh, you're only having fun 3 weeks out throughout the year. No, have fun all year. So to make it fun for you as a teacher, I tell my students this. I'm very open about this. I teach to entertain myself, and that's my biggest suggestion to teachers. Like, first and foremost, how are you going to have fun teaching it? Because if it is, like, it's going to be relevant for the students. If you're teaching it, it's relevant, obviously, right? Like, you're the teacher. You know what needs to be taught, and it's going to be relevant. So find a way to make it fun for you, because you have to do it 7 times a day. I like to connect to. I have kind of an immature sense of humor, so I like to connect to things that are funny. I think of, like, the math rap teacher it was big like 10 years ago or 12 years ago or so. He was kind of on the workshop circuit. He used to teach math using rap, and as we know, music allows us to memorize things really easier. I shouldn't say really easy, but easier. Like, case in point, we memorize song lyrics easily. So I mean, not easily, but I think you know what I mean. So he used rap, and it was great. And I'm like, where did he go? Like, that was a while ago, but he didn't stick around. Like, I don't know what happened. We should be doing more of that, right? More workshops like that. So let's talk quickly, and then a few more things here. I'm going to talk about the education studies. Let's talk about, why doesn't enjoyment show up in education studies? I don't know. My guess is it doesn't sound very professional. Right? Start up like, hey guys, all right, let's learn how to have fun. Let's lighten up and let's have some fun in class. Let's create enjoying lesson plan. Let's create lesson plans that we enjoy teaching and students enjoy learning. Go. We don't do that a lot. It's more like, well, let's get some graphic organizers and it just doesn't sound professional to talk about having fun, and it should. But my question to teachers is, are you having purposeful fun in your classroom? Like, are you? Like, is it purposeful fun? Like, do you enjoy it? Is it something you enjoy? Do you pre-plan your fun? And you should. I really think you should. Of course, I really think it. That's what this whole presentation's about. So let's talk about the Hattie's effect size chart. So here's I forgot how many there are. There's all the things that he put in his book. And I'm going to talk about humor a little bit. And I'm not saying that you have to be humorous to have enjoyment. I'm not saying that at all. But I want to bring up humor, because there's nothing on this chart that talks about enjoyment. The only thing is the word humor down here. And according to this meta-analysis study, humor, which we know contributes to the #1 determining factor of success in genres, right? Not just education. I mean, in business and life, and whatever. Playing an instrument, if you enjoy it and you're progressing, then you're going to want to keep doing it more. Humor is way down here. So I would go, dude, seriously? Connecting with a teacher is less important than insert whatever up here? I don't think that's true, and I've got some science to support it. And so that's where I want to say that I think educational studies, they're not wrong. I think that sometimes they're just incomplete. They don't take everything into account. And so when I think of humor, and again, I'm not saying you have to insert jokes all throughout your teaching. I'm not saying that at all. Enjoyment doesn't just mean humor. It could be. But humor can lead to enjoyment. Again, I'm just using humor because it was on his chart. Humor leads to enjoyment, which leads to more interest, which leads to more engagement, which leads to less stress. And if you're less stressed, your brain's able to process things better, which leads to better learning, more efficient learning, and so humor for sure is an effective learning strategy. And can I replace the word humor with just enjoyment or fun? Definitely an effective learning strategy. So we'll talk quickly about knowing your audience, and I want to show you some results. I'll talk about some results real fast. So in business, of course, you're taught to know your audience, right? Know who you're selling to. Make sure you line up your products with your audience wants, your clients wants, etc. And so I think as adults, we tend to see things from the perspective of a fully developed brain. And we have this idea of like, I know what's important, even though you don't know what's important, I do. But business teaches, know your audience. And so from a teenage mindset, if we know how we can help teenagers enjoy learning better and be more connected to learning, we should find a way to allow that connection. I don't know if I'm saying that right. I hope I'm saying that right. We shouldn't be standing up there going, I know what's best for you. Trust me, do what I say because I know what's best for you. Because they're not going to be like, okay, thank you, right? Figure out how their mindset works. I've talked about that in other teenage neuroscience videos. But I think sometimes we ask the wrong experts. So I think the problem is that we don't ask students what they want. And I'm generalizing. Hey, what do you want? Chocolate cake. I don't mean that. But we ask educators what the best way to educate is. And the thing is, it's like to me, I love analogies. Sorry, bear with me. It's like asking the chef what the best tasting food is, rather than asking his or her customers. Hey, chef, what's the best tasting food? This is it. And you're like, dude, that's nasty. Ask the customers, what's really good here? Oh, the desserts or this or that, right? Ask students, what do you want in a successful classroom? They'll tell you. And then we just have to now listen to them. Okay, so let me tell you a real quick story. I got to make this fast because this story can go long. I'll make it fast though. It's just it totally supports what I'm saying. I hate gardening. I hate it with a passion. Seriously, I never knew I hated gardening until I moved to Fallbrook and we got about an acre of land and it had a bunch of weeds. And if you pull weeds, they come back, right? Like kind of quickly. And so you're out there again doing it. But I hate gardening. And I always lived in a townhome or a condo, whatever. My wife and I always did. So I didn't know I hated gardening until I, got a little bit of land. And my wife loves it. She's from the Philippines, so she grew up like they didn't garden for fun; they gardened for food. So she's really good at gardening. So we get here, and she loves it. I hate it. I can't stand it. Yesterday, no, 2 days ago, I'm digging a hole for a new apricot tree, and I hate this, right? And so I'm digging, and every time I dig, I'm like, oh, right, just like slowly doing it. It took me 45 minutes to dig this hole, which probably would have taken 10 minutes if I actually enjoyed gardening. And every couple of minutes, I'm like, oh, and I'm like stretching my back and really exaggerating, how terrible this was for me. And I wish I was joking, but I wasn't. That's what I was doing. And I'm looking at my wife for some sympathy. She's not even paying attention to me because she's loving this garden thing. She's in the flow. So because I not only don't enjoy gardening, I hate it. Because I really don't like gardening, I'm not really accomplishing what I want to, what I want to do efficiently, effectively. It's taking me forever to do it. And it probably wasn't the best effort that I could put into and the best outcome. My wife, on the other hand, loves it. And so she's completely succeeding at this thing. So a perfect example of if you don't like something, you're not going to do it as well as if you do like something. So last couple things, and then we'll come to a close here. So you might think to yourselves like, yeah, our current way works, right? Like we've been doing it this way for so many years. What about all these latest and greatest strategies that we get at all these workshops? And I won't go over this completely because you can see this in my other video. But as I mentioned in my math video, the math scores haven't fluctuated much over the past 50 years. And I've talked about why that is. And our math teachers are amazing. They're doing everything they can. But there's a little science behind why math scores haven't fluctuated that much. There's a link to that video right there. You can watch that. Reading scores, same thing. Over the past 30 years, our reading scores have stayed relatively the same, or if not lowered a little bit. So there's some links there. And ELD. I mentioned in my ELD video, if you haven't seen that, there's a link to it right there. I think it's a really good video. Got a lot of information there. Our reading scores have stayed relatively the same for about the past 30 years for ELD reading levels. And so we're investing all this time, all this money, and everything's staying the same. Now, to be fair, I understand, studies and test scores, they don't include all the determining factors. I get that. But I wonder, so I just got back from the CABE conference, the ELD, the bilingual ELD conference. And I got back from that conference a few weeks ago or so. and it costs. I think the district paid 9 grand for all of us to go. And yeah, I think including airfare and hotel in a normal year, it'd be almost $50,000. And so I wonder, am I bringing $50,000 of information back to you guys? Like if I get all this ELD information I share with you, is it $50,000 worth every single year for the studies to pretty much stay the same? There was the scores, the results. So I wonder, maybe we should look at things a little differently. There's something we're missing, and I think bringing enjoyment to the table is the main thing. I think if students enjoyed what they're doing more, and teachers enjoyed how they teach, we would bring a lot more success to our classes. So let's talk really. This will be the last thing that I talk about, I promise you, and then we'll get into part two. I'll explain it. So we'll talk about having fun real fast. So how do you have fun? How can you enjoy in the classroom? There's a lot of things. I would say first thing is identify what's fun to you. Well, what do you like to do? What's enjoyable to you? And bring that into the classroom. Bring your personality in. I have a very, I don't say stupid sense of humor, but I'm still kind of a child at heart, right? So I bring that into the classroom. Think of your identity as a teacher. Now, if we were doing like a 2-hour workshop, I would have you all use a graphic organizer and list all the things that like. What are you as a teacher, and blah blah blah. And it's actually not a bad thing to do. Pull out a piece of paper and just jot down what's your identity as a teacher. What's important to you? I always think of this. I'm an actor playing whatever role I need to play for that day, right? Sometimes it's me, getting more serious. Sometimes it's me like giving a stupid analogy or playing a role or acting something out to make a point. And I'm an actor and I can do that. So, my identity as a teacher, I think about this sometimes. So like I love heavy metal. And so I bring that in the classroom, and I do let everyone know about that. And, oftentimes if you have students that are heavy metal listeners or punk listeners or anything like that, if you're a big heavy metal fan, they'll connect to you right away. I've had students tell me like day one, they're like, "You're my favorite teacher." And I'm like, "Great, I just met you." Or I've had students say, "You're my favorite teacher and I don't even have you." And I'm like, "What?" And they're big heavy metal fans. So there's things out there that you enjoy that your students will connect with. So share that. It's okay. I'm also a big no homework person. There's studies after studies after studies that support that homework is not conducive to successful learning. It does not promote successful learning, except for math. 20 minutes a day for math, because you're learning something new, you got to repeat it. We get that. So, but I'm totally anti-homework, 100%. And the students know that. So they know that we're not going to waste time in class. And my students work harder because of that, because they know that if they don't finish something, they have to take it home for homework, and they don't want to do homework. So I don't have students, like, they don't have downtime, because I just no homework. We're going to get it all done in class. Boom. It has to be fun for me to teach it. I'll be very honest. I didn't like high school at all. I couldn't stand high school. It was just dull for me. I don't really remember too many of my teachers. I was ready to get out. Like I said, I had a business when I was when I was a senior. It wasn't fun for me. So when I became a teacher, I thought, I'm going to make my classes fun. I use a lot of real world examples. I'll talk about that in part two. That to me creates credibility in what you're teaching. I'm really big on like, we're a family. I'm really big on like, I need to take care of everything in the classroom, right? And we're a family. We see each other every day. I would hope we like each other. I do know, like, I'm not a meet at the door guy. There was a push years ago, like, oh, greet your students at the door. It's just not me. It's awkward. I feel weird doing it. When they come in, I greet them. I'm standing at the front. I'm chatting with students. I say hi when they come in. So some of you know this, I was a kickboxer for years. I was a young kickboxer, not like last year. I was a young kickboxer. And I traveled, the nation for competitions and so on. And one of my favorite coaches, he had a lot of other people that he was coaching, but he made me feel like I was the only client he had. And I always remembered that guy. And I always remembered, I'm going to make my students feel like they're the only student I have. Like, obviously you don't talk to one student the entire class and neglect the others. I'm not saying that. But every time a student comes in, I would say hi to that person. I would try to remember conversations we would have. I would bring them up. I would use them as examples, right? If someone's a baseball player and I'm talking about, hard work, success, or whatever, I'll bring up, like Joey, the baseball player, he's always doing great. Now, I always like to bring students up in class, so make them feel special. And so I think every teacher or most teachers have the unit that excites them the most. Yeah, I love teaching this. Why can't you create all of your units the way you create the unit that excites you the most? Is it the content? Is it how, like think of teaching as an art, right? So think of what do you do in the unit that excites you the most? Try to replicate that with with other units. It doesn't mean teach them the same way. It just means try to find a way to make every unit, a unit that you love. So I'm coming to the end, I promise you. When planning lessons, I think this is something that should be talked about during PLC. How do you make this fun? So in PLC, you know what you're teaching, right? We're teaching this, we're teaching that. Okay, that's out of the way. How are we going to make it fun? What are you going to do? Because the way you make it fun is going to be different than the way I make it fun. How are you going to do it? And that's a question I think that should be asked at every PLC. Every time you're planning something, how are we going to make this fun? Enjoyable. And maybe enjoyable is the better word, Is having fun a new way of teaching? No. I think a lot of people remember like their favorite teachers and why they were their favorites. And it was because you enjoyed the class. And again, when I'm saying fun, it could mean enjoyable, it could be engaging. Whatever you got out of that class that made you enjoy it, the reason you remember it is because you enjoyed that somehow. And some people will be like, education is not about having fun. Sometimes they just need to learn. You're right, but enjoying what you're doing makes it much easier to learn. I think at least I've supported that. So I'm going to talk about two more things, and then I'll close this out. Every class doesn't have to be enjoyable. I want to say that right away. Don't think that every class, I'm not going to have fun today. How am I going to crack some jokes in there? It doesn't have to be that way. Remember dopamine. Students will remember the overall feeling they have in your class. In my class, when we do everything in class, so that includes writing essays. There's times the students are sitting there staring at their paper for 45 minutes straight writing an essay. I'm not up there trying to get them to enjoy the whole writing the essay process while we're writing for 45 minutes. So it's not a daily thing per se, but it's something that if a student knows, if you're, for the most part, your lessons are enjoyable, they enjoy you as a person, as a teacher, they're more willing to listen, to enjoy, to relax when they're with a teacher that they feel is doing the best that they can to make the lessons fun. And students will remember the overall feeling they had in your class, not the day-to-day, the overall feeling. I want to bring this up to, I wasn't going to put this in, no joke, this email came in 2 nights ago, seriously. I had a student that from when I first started teaching 15 years ago, so 15 years ago, at least 16 years ago, this student was my student. But I'm trying to remember exactly. Sorry, not that it doesn't matter, but over 10 years, right? 10 or 12 years ago. And this is what she says. My name is, and I left her name out. And you came to my graduation in 20-something after my parents threw me out. Now, I remember this student. And she continues to write, I felt compelled to reach out to you many times as I've gotten older. Just wanted to say you were my favorite teacher. Not because your class was fun, not because you made it easy to learn, but because of the life lesson that you taught me. Now, I have to tell you, I don't remember which life lesson she's referring to because I use a lot of life lessons in class. But this is what she said. No other teacher looked into my life at all. And I don't write that with bitterness because they don't have to. Having a teacher who cared when others, like anybody outside my family, didn't, was a defining moment that always stuck with me. So she might not remember the lesson I taught about Romeo and Juliet, but she remembers the feeling she had in the class. And she uses that in her life. Remember, it doesn't have to be every single day, right? Students will remember the overall feeling they have in your class. So things to take away from this workshop, and then I'll explain part 2. It's good. It's actually encouraged to have fun in your class for everybody's sake, right? Enjoy. Create your lesson plans in a way that's going to be enjoyable, in a way that your students will accomplish things. Create lessons that are fun for you to teach, and think about the students' enjoyments as well. And that's something we never talk about, and we should. Don't be afraid to think outside the box. When I first came to Paloma, I introduced graphic novels. I used graphic novels in my classroom, and I got some snickering behind the back. I get people what's he doing using graphic novels? And I used it because graphic novels are a really good way to introduce a theme, a topic, without spending 6 weeks on a novel, right? And now graphic novels are used in the classroom, and it was like a couple years ago, use graphic novels, it's this new thing. Colleges are doing it and stuff, and I'm like, we did that 15 years ago. But at the time, I thought outside the box. Don't be afraid to think outside the box. In my class, I introduce financial information. We do investing information, stuff like that, Roth IRAs and stuff like that. Now, we don't spend tons of time. I take a day of the year to show them something outside of the classroom, right? Financial literacy. There's a lot of things that I do that kind of outside the box. Don't be afraid to be outside the box. think of like when you know that there's something that you have to get into that's going to be really heavy academic wise, start with something that's enjoyable, right? Connecting the students to it. I'll show you that more in part two. Teachers having fun with what and how they're teaching, and students having fun with what they're learning. That's the whole point of this. So that ends this part one. Coming up in part two, and please don't skip it. Like now you're like, okay, I get what you're saying. Okay, all right, I got that. Part two is me implementing this, and I'm going to show you how I do it, and I'm very meticulous when I create my lesson plans, and it's all like science oriented. I promise you. Please don't skip that. It might be easy to just go, that's just you doing your thing. I need to do it my way. Um, please watch that part as well, and I'll show you kind of how I do it, and little tricks like hacking the brain to get students to remember things. I have a lot of little tricks in there. So anyway, thank you so much for sitting through this. I really do appreciate it. And this is the end of part one, and stay tuned for part two.